Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
Recording in progress.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the F4L Headquarters Podcast. I am your host with the most, the F4L icon, Sean Jazz Stevens. And we are very happy and blessed to introduce you guys shortly to a man who has helped me in the career of many, that being Sheldon-Goldberg. We're just waiting for him. First and foremost, let's give him a round of applause. Excellent. All right, everyone, let's welcome my good friend, longtime friend, Sheldon-Goldberg to the F4L Headquarters Podcast. And he'll be joining us shortly. Good morning. Not connecting audio.
Hey, Sean.
Good morning. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I am fantabulous. Thank you. Oh, there you are. You handsome devil, you. I don't know how you do it, man. How are you?
I just live right. I'm good. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's an honor to have you on the podcast. You know, I figured, if I'm going to have anyone on the podcast as far as wrestling goes, I might as well start with a man who knows more about wrestling than I'll ever will. So I want to welcome you to the F4L. I want to welcome you officially to the F4L Headquarters Podcast, and there should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to this, and I hope you are as well.
I'm pleased to be here.
Well, we're honored to have you. Well, Sheldon, before we get huge into things, I want you to, if you could, to explain to the people who have lived under a rock maybe a little bit why they may not have heard, where they should have known your name, Sheldon-Goldberg.
Well, a lot of people know me from being the promoter of New England Championship Wrestling for over 20 years. They might have known me from being on TV specials like A&E Network's Unreal Story of Professional Wrestling and Andre the Giant Larger Than Life. If they go further back, they might have known me from being a theater producer. But, I've kicked around a lot of different things. So, if you know me, you know me. If you don't, well, it's nice to meet you.
It's only a matter of time, right?
Right.
And you've recently got into the book writing world, which is amazing as well. How has that been treating you?
Yeah, well, let me tell you, 13 months ago, I was on a plane home from Las Vegas from a Cauliflower Alley Club reunion, and I was on the plane, and my kidneys failed. And I was in the hospital for about a month, and I'm laying there at Mass General in the hospital, and I'm saying, I can't go out like this. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something, and whatever that something is, I'm going to try to make an impact with it.
Mm-hmm.
So after I got out of the hospital, I went back to work for about 6 months, and then I retired from that, and now I just started doing other creative projects, the first of which to emerge is this book, The Last Fall. So I'm very proud of it, very pleased with it, and very pleased with the reaction that it's gotten from people so far.
That's very exciting, man. And you know what? First and foremost, I'm glad you're okay. God bless that you're alive. I'm very happy you're here. The world wouldn't be the same without you. So we appreciate that. That must have been a scary time for you. But you know what? I get that. What do? You're so used to something for so long. I can understand how that could be.
Well, I wasn't going to quit and give up. I was going to pick myself up, dust myself off, and then figure out what I could do and do it. So there you have it.
Sure. Now, granted, I've seen a lot of your work, and I've known you for a number of years. Growing up in the New England area, I think anyone who's been in the New England area has been to a show, especially a New England Championship Wrestling show, can say that you are probably one of the most synonymous people in New England. And I believe you did know my trainer, former, the WE Hall of Famer, Killer Kowalski. I believe you are aware of Walter.
Well, yeah.
And I was wondering if you wouldn't mind, because I've talked about Killer way too much more. I'm sure my viewers are sick of listening to my stories about him, but because you're a little bit old, you have been around a little longer than I have. Maybe you could tell some Sheldon Goldberg's point of view on the great Killer Kowalski, perhaps.
Well, he was one of the greatest of all time. I mean, he's one of those guys whose name was synonymous with pro wrestling for many, many years. And how could you not think of the name Killer Kowalski and not think of pro wrestling? You'd have to have lived in a cave or something.
Sure.
To not have But the thing about Walter was just how kind he was.
Yeah.
And how welcoming to people and so forth, and just what a great man he was. And I always would kind of look at guys who were around and say, "Oh, Walter this, Walter that." What are you talking about, Walter? This guy's one of the greatest of all time.
Seriously.
How do you treat him like he's your next door neighbor?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he made you feel that way in some way,
sure,
shape, or form, but no, this guy was one of the greatest of all time.
He set the bar. He set the bar.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people don't understand that. And he was a very giving person. You're correct. He was very giving, a wealth of knowledge, and he never was shy about not being able to pass that on to somebody else.
Right.
If you wanted to learn something, you could talk to Walt. I mean, he was always available. If you saw Walter,
he was very generous with his knowledge too.
He was
generous with that knowledge. You could ask him about anyone from any time period, and he'd give you his honest opinion about them.
Sure, and I think that's a rare thing. Especially today in wrestling,
Right.
There's a lack of that these days. But I think it's safe to say, Cole Kowalski, Walter to some, he is known synonymous in the wrestling world for many things, not just for being one of the greatest of wrestling of all time, but also producing and training some of the best of all time. It's kind of like yourself. There's a lot of people who have crossed through the New England Championship Wrestling realm who you could probably rattle off 700 names of people who've been through your camp who have gone on to do bigger things. And what is that like for you as a promoter to see that?
Well, it's gratifying. That's the idea of being an independent promoter. You know that the guys that are working for you, that you're just a way station for them.
Sure.
Hopefully you're giving them an experience that they can take something away from that's positive for them and get on to bigger and better things. And it happened in a lot of cases. And even some of the ones who didn't necessarily were great performers, were great wrestlers. And we have a project coming out. My next project after this one is going to be a video project called New England Championship Wrestling: The Lost Matches Live.
Oh, man.
And what that is we're going to take about a half dozen or so matches that are not on YouTube, some of which have never been seen before other than if you were there live.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to put them together in a program, and we're going to show them in a movie theater with a live Q&A afterwards.
Oh, that's exciting. We're going to keep an eye out for that.
That's something very, very unique. I try to pride myself on doing things that are different and unique. And this is one of them, and I'm looking forward to that.
I really like that, and I respect a lot of that. And like I said, you got to innovate. And one of the things in the wrestling world is you have to either evolve and set yourself apart from everybody else. There are a lot of promoters out there who want to produce and put on a show. But there are so many people who just think this is how wrestling is, and they follow that kind of scrapbook what they think it is. But they get stuck in that, and they're afraid to venture out. Me, for example, when I thought I was done wrestling, silly me, thinking I was done with wrestling, I figured in 2019, I'm walking away from the thing, and there's not going to be Jazz Fitness anymore. I'm all set. My body's too old, blah, blah, blah. And then, unfortunately, that's how I discovered YouTube. And my son, who was sick from school when he was 11, I wanted to cheer him up, so we used a wrestling game to build. I'm sure you've seen a lot of you may have seen some of our stuff, But to cheer him up, I built Peter Griffin from Family Guy and Homer Simpson from the, and so forth. So, we wanted to see, when it came to putting the match together in the wrestling show, we found out it could go to demo, and the system would pick the winner. And my son said, we should put this on YouTube. He said when he was 11. I said, people aren't going to want to watch wrestling video game stuff on YouTube when he was 11. He's going to be 21, by the way, in a couple weeks.
Wow.
And since then, we've been kind of, YouTube says we're the first in that genre, which is interesting. And the fact of doing it with my son and teach him kind of that thing, that aspect and how to run and book things like that. But also, something I've been trying to do for a while is educate people about the classics of wrestling. Because without people like Kowalski or, these great legends that people may not know today, none of us I wouldn't be in this business today if it wasn't for people before me. There had to be somebody who sparked that interest. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I'm curious, one of the things I've always wondered, what got you interested in pro wrestling? When did your love for pro wrestling start? Do you remember?
I was about 8 years old when I discovered pro wrestling, and there was Bruno Sammartino. And, I think it's funny because I think if you didn't live through Bruno's era, you can't really get a grasp of how big and how important he was and what a hero he was to people. Mm-hmm. He was just bigger than life, and he was the Charles Atlas story come to life. The 98-pound weakling who came to America after World War II as an immigrant and built himself up and became literally one of the strongest men in the world. And that classic picture of Bruno with a championship belt, and he's like, like that.
Yep.
That was the world heavyweight champion.
Right.
Anybody in this part of the country looked at that picture, world heavyweight champion. That was it. He was it. And if you, in Bruno's heyday, if you were to walk through the North End on a night where pro wrestling was in the Garden, the streets would be empty because all the Italians would be in the Garden cheering on Bruno. Mm-hmm. He had such a bond with his fans. It's not just Italians, but any immigrants, and even people like myself who are not immigrants. I mean, he was the man. And I think if you didn't live through that era, you can't quite get a grasp of just what a big star Bruno Sammartino was.
Sure. Absolutely. And you know what you said? Like, do you remember the first time you saw a live wrestling show?
Oh, yeah. It was in the Garden.
Of course. Mine too, oddly.
Bruno Sammartino versus Gorilla Monsoon. It was the night the ring broke.
And that wasn't a gimmick either. It legitimately broke.
No, and little old 12-year-old me thought that this stuff was fake. Oh no, that wasn't fake.
Right.
They just broke that ring.
Right.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
I think I've told the stories, on the show about where I became a wrestling fan, going live. It was also when I decided this is what I'm going to do one day. Prior to that, I studied martial arts prior to that, and I loved competing in that. But I was also skinny, I was scrawny, I was short. And the pro wrestling, and going to my first wrestling show was also at the Garden. But what I find what was interesting is, one of the things that I thought set me a little bit different is, it wasn't the main event that sold me on wrestling, it was the opening match. It was, here's some names, Leaping Lenny Poffo versus, I know you know these names, Leaping Lenny Poffo versus Steve Lombardi prior to becoming the Brooklyn Brawler. Do you remember these?
Wow.
This is back when Lenny Poffo was throwing the Frisbees out into the crowd. That whole thing.
I've got one of those in here in my closet somewhere.
I bet you do. But that was the match that actually turned me into a wrestling fan, believe it or not. That was the amazing, the fluidness of everything, the storytelling. And I was only, 7 or 8 years old in that match. The main event was Hogan and Bossman for the title.
Okay.
And it was a DQ.
What was the main event?
That was the main event. But, another thing that set me a little differently is I wasn't really sold on the Hulk Hogan thing. I know there are people who love Hulk Hogan, and one of the things that makes wrestling great is I think one of the things that sets pro wrestling different than any other sport or any other, fandom is you can be passionate about, this guy or that guy, and you're still in the same kind of aspect. You know what I mean? You could be a Hogan fan, but you could be a Flair fan. They're completely different, in aspects. But me personally, as far as the WWE goes at that time, or F at that point, I was amazed by the storytelling by that opening match, or what my uncle called them, jobbers, as he called them, or what did he call them? That's what he called them. He was a wrestling fan, but I actually understood, and as I got in the wrestling world and I started training, how important those people were to the development of people like Hulk Hogan. It wasn't for like the Mario Mancinis and the Jose Luis Riveras of the world. A lot of those big stars wouldn't look as big as they are. I mean, personally, I get the Hogan thing. Hogan was huge back in the 80s, and, he's synonymous with the WWF at that time. But personally, I like the people who tell a story who actually work. I thought one of the best promos, I don't know if I'm curious your thoughts, one of the people I thought did one of the best promos was Jake Roberts. And what set him different about Jake Roberts was he didn't scream and yell like all these other guys. He told a story, and it wasn't loud. And he told something, and you believed what he was going to say, because it was cold and methodical. It doesn't matter if it was heel or face. You believed what Jake Roberts said. He didn't scream and yell. Do you know what I mean? I'm curious what your thoughts are on, as talking goes and performance goes. Like, obviously, your favorite wrestler would probably be Bruno Sammartino, would you say? Or is there someone bigger than that?
Sure.
Of course.
No, Bruno was, in his era when I was growing up, he was the biggest.
Sure. Absolutely.
He was the biggest, yeah.
Now, you talk about promos. There were always guys who were great promos, but what a great promo has, all the elements of a great promo boil down to one thing, and that's sincerity. Right. Exactly.
If you can make the audience believe what you're saying, then they'll buy into it.
Sure. I agree.
A lot of guys today don't understand that.
They don't.
Everything is scripted and written out for them.
Yeah.
They don't have to come up with it off the top of their head and make it resonate, make it real.
And that one of the things I have always been thankful for Kowalski, and I don't know if they still do that. Actually, the school doesn't exist anymore, Kowalski School. I think last I heard, was it Top Rope took that over, or Chaotic, one of the two.
Chaotic,
yeah. Yeah, it's been a while. But one of the things that Kowalski did for me, and was Wagner Brown was also one of my trainers, and was April Hunter. So one of the things we did that helped me in my promo skills was at the end of the training session, I would have to cut a promo on everybody in the class. So if they were heel, I would have to cut a face promo. If they were face, I had to cut a heel promo. And I had to do that at the end of each promo, because growing up, I was very shy. I would never, granted, I was the person who, would fight with people, and I did, stand up for the kids who were getting bullied and stuff like that, because I'm not someone who's going to watch someone get bullied. When I told Kowalski, what they called me in high school, he said, that's who you are. That's who you're going to be. You are Jazz Vengeance. You're the guy who, you're the voice of the people. You're the person who intervenes when nobody else will. And, whether they're big or small or how big they are, vengeance comes for everybody. So that was the idea. But one of the things that I really attribute a lot of my promo skills to him. And then years later, when I, after I got injured, as it happens in wrestling, and I came back as the Jazz Fitness thing, I still had those things. Kind of like riding a bike, kind of, wrestling. And I helped out with a company that unfortunately no longer exists. As you're aware, the wrestling business, unfortunately, there are ones that open and close. And one of the things I respected about New England Championship Wrestling is how you guys still maintain, a solid fan base and a solid grounding. You know what I mean? I really respect a lot of that. I know a lot of the guys who you work with, and I've had some time over there myself, which I'm grateful for. And one of the things that made Jazz Fitness the character, because I didn't think that I could get over as a heel. I said, I don't think people are going to believe that I'm a bad guy. But one of the things that I thought was amazing is the fact that, the promoter just put, how it goes, just before time, they're like, okay, this has been changed and that's been changed. Now you got, instead of a 5-minute promo session, because I had the fitness center, the in-ring talk show thing, they said you're going to have now 3 minutes instead of 5. Okay. But we still were able to do that, and it wasn't scripted. We didn't talk it out, and I just went out there and bing, bing, boom. And unfortunately, Jazz Fitness was a heel. I was actually pretty good at channeling that heel. But to circle back, if it wasn't for the skills that I learned from, the training that I got, the being able to tell a story and the promos and believability, none of that would have happened. So, I think they're important. Cool stuff.
Absolutely.
Now, Sheldon, so your new book, The Last Fall, I don't want to give away too much because, I want people to read it, especially I'm going to read it myself. And I'm going to be going to your launch party, which is coming up. Are you excited about the launch party?
Very excited about it. Very excited about it. I'm going to see a lot of people who are very important to me and have a chance to share this book with them. And I'm very excited about it because I'm very proud of the book. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to write a full-length novel, but I did, and I'm happy with the way that it came out. And so far, everyone who's read the book has raved about it, which I'm extremely grateful for, and I think you'll enjoy it too when you get a chance to read it.
I'm very much looking forward to it, and one of the things that I'm going to be there, of course, and as someone who also loves writing, I've loved writing since I was very young. But as I've talked to you before about, one of the things that my biggest block is I lose interest in myself, let alone anything else. But like a short story, I could do no problem. But writing a book that has the same consistency, I lose interest in it because I'm like, okay, well, and I'm also what they call a pants writer, like meaning that I write everything in one shot. So writing a novel, I'm sure you can understand that I'm sure you couldn't write your book in one sitting. But I love writing. So what was something that helped you in your journey, if you don't mind me asking?
The writing journey?
Yeah, what helped you? Obviously not being able to, do that, putting your energy in from one thing to the other, because you've always been a workhorse when it came to, being a promoter and all the other stuff. But how did that apply to writing a book?
There was a lot of discipline involved, but it was a joyful thing. It wasn't a chore at all. Mm-hmm. I mean, this book came together really. The first draft of this book came together in 3 weeks. It was very quick. I have to tell you, I have a friend. He's no longer with us, and he wrote a couple of books. His name is Howard Brody. Mm. Howard was at one time the president of the National Wrestling Alliance. We were friends for many years. I worked with him and the late hero Matt Suda on a project called Ring Warriors back in the late 90s. And Howard and I were very close. Howard was like the brother I never had. And Howard wrote 2 books. The first one, he collaborated with Dusty Rhodes on Dusty's autobiography, Reflections of an American Dream. Mm-hmm. And then he had a second book, which is more an autobiographical book about his experience in wrestling, called Swimming with Piranhas. And as he was writing those books, he would send me chapters. Well, what do you think about this? And what should I do with this? Or blah, blah, blah. And he would always say to me, Shelly, you got to write a book. You got to write. One of these days, you got to write a book. And I never got around to it because I was always too busy. And now that I'm a little bit more at leisure, I was able to tackle it. And I really believe that Howard was kind of on my shoulder. The spirit of Howard was there with me as I was putting this book together. I know there's some things in the book that he would just laugh out loud at. And there were other things in the book he said, I wish I had thought of that. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that the spirit of Howard really helped me write the book.
Are you able to tell people maybe a synopsis, perhaps, maybe, or what the book was to be about, or without giving away too much, or no?
Yeah, sure. I can give you a little synopsis without giving anything away.
That would be great.
Yeah, it's the story of a wrestler by the name of Rick Pacheco. Now, this book is fiction. It is not fact. It is fiction. So it follows Rick Pacheco's journey through professional wrestling from literally stumbling into the business at the age of 11 years old in 1971 to the end of his in-ring career in 1999. And it's a tale of, how can I put this? It's a tale of
the wrestling business.
It's a tale of, I had this right on the tip of my tongue earlier, but it's triumph, tragedy, and redemption is what happens in this book. You follow his journey through his career.
That sounds awesome.
Through the getting into the business and so forth, and becoming a big star, then all of a sudden all of that changing, and then his road to redemption and happiness. So
Very cool.
I think it's a tale that anyone, even if you're not a wrestling fan, can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are a wrestling fan, you'll dig it. You really will.
Sure. No, that's understandable there, and I'm very excited to read it. I think it'll be very good and very, all honesty, I don't know if you had a chance to watch that TV show Heels at all. Have you ever watched that? Have you been able?
Yes, I did.
What are your thoughts on that TV show Heels, out of curiosity? Because I thought there are a lot of the aspects that I can relate to myself. I've seen a lot of that, and there's some things obviously that are Hollywood based. From someone's perspective of that, hearing your description of the book, kind of an idea, those kinds of ideas kind of pop in my head because I can actually view a lot of that. So, and what other people perspect what the wrestling world is. I'm curious your thoughts on a show like Heels and how it's usually perceived.
Well, the thing about Heels is that it's a Hollywood writer's version of what pro wrestling is. And some of it bears a resemblance to reality, and a lot of it didn't. I think The Last Fall bears much more of a resemblance to reality of what wrestling was and had become than you're going to see in a thing like Heels. That's why I think that there might be a possibility of an afterlife for The Last Fall as a movie or a limited series or whatever.
Could you see writing a follow-up to this, perhaps? Is it going to be a follow-up, do you think, or is this one and done?
The book ends where it's supposed to end, so I don't think there's a sequel in the book.
For this particular storyline.
I might do another wrestler's story. I actually started writing a completely different story before I happened on this and said, oh, okay, well, I like this idea. And
I get how that works.
The whole thing. So that's why I stopped that original idea and went ahead and wrote The Last Fall.
Makes sense. I mean, I get that. And, I can understand that better than a lot. I'm very particular when it comes to writing. I am very, a lot of people don't understand what that thing of writing is. I'm very much a perfectionist when it comes to writing. If it's something that I know people are going to read, I want to make sure it's perfect. I have no problem just stopping right in the middle of writing I can write 7 pages and say, nope, I'm done. I've got to do this over again. I don't like it. And because I want it to be good. And I think for myself, whenever I write anything, it's, how do I invoke that feeling out of the reader? How do I reach that, not knowing who's going to read it or how that's going to, how do I get that feeling out of that person? You know what I mean? And for me, I mean, I'm sure, now that you've heard some of the reviews of your book and stuff, that must be gratifying for yourself, I'm going to guess, right?
Oh my God, so much so. I really wrote it because, I wanted to write kind of a love letter to pro wrestling and the pro wrestling life.
Right.
But I also wrote it just because I wanted to see if I could.
And now you can.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so... The whole process has been so incredibly gratifying. And for people to embrace the book and to really rave about it as they have, it's just the icing on the cake. I mean, I couldn't ask for anything more. There's writing a book and then there's promoting it, like an appearance like this,
right?
Where I'm talking to you about the subject and so forth.
Sure.
But that's a long haul situation. People say, "Oh, when are you going to write the next one?" Well, I'm going to promote this one first. I got to get this in as many people's hands as I can get it into.
Sure.
But this whole thing has been just an absolute joy. You have no idea. I thought, I didn't know, when I was laying in that hospital bed 13, 14 months ago, I had no idea what my future was going to be, or even if I was going to have a future. and to sort of kick out of that and then do something like this, it's just, it's just really soul satisfying in a big way.
Absolutely, and I think what's really impressive there is the fact, that's a story in itself, the redemption story for yourself. 11, not long ago, you didn't know what your life was going to be. You didn't know what was going to happen. That must have been scary, number one, but in the same sense, the fact that you overcame that to get to where you are, that is impressive. The fact that you survived and you kicked all that is a resurrection story, but that's a survival story. And that, to me, is a more important thing to me.
I've got three lessons for people when they look at all this and listen to what I've been telling you, and that is, you're never too old, it's never too late, and you can do great things if you put your mind to it. Those three things. Keep those three things in mind.
Those are fantastic lessons right there. And I hope that's true, because next year I've decided that, since my kids were really too young to really get to enjoy my wrestling stuff, I've made that unfortunate or fortunate decision to go back into pro wrestling because I'm a clown. But, I'm glad you said that, because, I was almost like, I don't know if I'm too old to go back into pro wrestling again. But, hearing those was very inspiring in general.
How old are you?
I'm gonna be 44 in March.
Well, hey man, I'm 67, so I'm no spring chicken here.
Yeah.
That's why I say I don't know what was going to be.
Sure.
I'm certainly not going to be doing anything physical, but
I feel
I've got a handle on it.
I feel like Jazz Fitness might have, I toyed with back and forth. I don't think necessarily Jazz Vengeance is coming back anytime soon. But Jazz Fitness, on the other hand, and I don't understand I'll personally, all aside, I don't understand how it is that the heel character is more popular than the face character. I don't understand how that works. You've been in the wrestling world a long time. Maybe you can shed light on why the heel sometimes is more popular than the face is. Do you know why people like to hate the heel?
Yeah, I do. I think that in today's society, people live vicariously through the antics of someone who gets away with doing things they're not supposed to be doing.
Sure.
I think that's a societal thing. It started really, you can trace that back to the Road Warriors.
Yeah, really.
The Road Warriors were the first really cool heels. The guys who came out and they were so bad that you couldn't help it, like, oh my God, look at these guys.
Right.
They were so impressive that even though you were supposed to boo them, you didn't.
You wouldn't dare.
Right.
Now, a lot of people don't.
Further back than that to Superstar Billy Graham.
Right, and that's someone who a lot of people, today, you might hear a little bit here and there. You don't, heel heat today is different than what it was then. Do you know what I mean? Like, actually, I don't know if the wrestlers today could handle wrestling then. Like, the heels, yes, they're. Because if you know, I've heard the stories and I know a lot more than I should probably. But also, being someone who was a heel and getting that heel heat, I know how rowdy the fans can be when you have that kind of thing. I don't know today if wrestlers today will get that. I really don't think people understand, like, the impact of wrestling in different areas, especially back in the territory days. Like, there are some places.
Yeah, there's people who really believe they thought what they saw was 1,000% real, and they lived and died by, their heroes.
Sure, and they interjected.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, how many stories have we heard over the years about riots at shows?
Yep.
Guys who were stabbed and shot at. And
it's legit.
And whatever.
It's to say the least.
I was friends with the late hero Matsuda. And I asked him one day, I said, how did it feel that people want to kill you? And he would say, because he spoke in broken English,
Sure.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. More they do it, more I love it. So, and I get it. It just showed that they were successful at what it is that they were supposed to be doing. And, you have an appreciation for that.
Sure. One of the things I think is amazing is when we have those legends and we have those people with big names, I think it's so important. That one of the things I like to do is try to give some knowledge I have to the younger guys who don't. Maybe there are guys today that you need a written script and you need these things, and I said you don't need that. Just channel that and build it into yourself. One of the things I think that the problem with the heel thing is people are given something that they don't truly believe in. And,
you're absolutely right.
Or they're not committed to it. Like, you'll hear stories about, like, Terry Taylor, for example, when he was a Red Rooster, and how he was so opposed to that character. But there's two sides of that spectrum, because you go in one area, and Terry Taylor is a very well-known, respected wrestler. But in WWE, you see the Red Rooster and, Cock-a-doodle-doo and all these other things,
Right.
But that aspect of it, there are stories if he fully embraced that. I mean, I don't really know how far you could go with, a Red Rooster, that character. I mean, how much more could you do? But on that aspect, if he fully committed to it, maybe. You know what I mean by that? I'm like, the people who aren't committed into these things.
I thought it was pretty ridiculous. But
it made no sense.
I sympathize with Terry Taylor.
Sure.
Terry Taylor was a good hand. He was popular. He was over in Mid-South.
Yeah.
He was over just being Terry Taylor.
Right.
Why that wasn't good enough,
yeah,
is a whole other issue. But those were the times, and that's what Vince McMahon wanted to get across, and that's what they made him do, and he did it because that was his job. So it is what it is.
Sure.
But, some guys embraced it and made it work. Look at Dusty Rhodes.
Dusty Rhodes is the best example of that, right?
Yeah.
I think originally
some guys like poor Terry Taylor,
right?
It just didn't click.
Or 700 other guys who were really good talents other places. They go there and like, what are you doing there? Steve Kern is a good example of that. Right. Wild Male Steve Kern. I mean, or even Matt Bourne. I mean, come on. Matt Bourne is a natural heel. He had some good heat there. Then you get over there and you make him a clown. Literally, they made him a clown.
Yeah, right.
And all these other hands that were really talented that just kind of, give them a character. Sometimes you give someone a character, you're kind of setting them up for failure. I mean, because there's only so much you can do with that. I mean, what are you supposed to do with a Mantar? I mean, what are you supposed to do? How far can you? I mean, okay, you play hockey. How does that, impact the wrestling world? Yeah, hockey's like the fight,
The Goon, yeah.
The Goon, which was, okay. And there's 700 other gimmicks that, like, why? What are you going to do with that?
Yeah.
It's a gimmick, which is all it is.
Like I say, some of them clicked and some of them, not so much.
Have you, in your opinion...
Schwartz.
Yeah, another good one. So in your opinion, that is a really good one. In your opinion now, because you've been in the wrestling world a while, and you've seen all the gimmicks, in your opinion, what do you think is the most ridiculous character, in your opinion, your wrestling, that you've experienced, you've seen so far?
Boy.
I know, right?
Knuckleball Schwartz was pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, that was up there.
His face painted up like a baseball.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty silly, but yeah, what can I tell you?
That's a good one. That's a good one right there.
WCW had Oz. That's pretty silly.
Oz.
And of course, the Shockmaster. Who could forget the Shockmaster?
That poor guy. He's actually a really good guy, Fred, but unfortunately, I think that there's sometimes when those instances happen, you're kind of labeled to that, kind of like Scott Steiner, Scott Steiner is someone who a lot of people respect in the tag team world. I mean, I used to like to tell people I knew Scott Steiner before he found, he got into the gym, as we say. Right. You know what I mean. But
exactly.
But what I thought was funny, a lot of people, when they think of Scott Steiner, they always think of that one promo in TNA with the whole Steiner math thing, which is, yeah, well, that's why some people just had managers. So, but, whatnot. Also trying to keep track of your time. I don't want to keep you too long, my friend. So I want to value your time here, and we appreciate you on here and whatnot. And make sure, well, before we have you go, we're going to have you make sure you tell everyone whatnot. Now, as far as necw goes, do you still go to the events at all? Or I know you're no longer really promoting a part of it. Do you go down there? Do you watch live events?
I see a couple of events every now and then. Last week, I went to see Proving Ground up in Beverly, where we used to run. Not in the same building, but we used to run up in Beverly. And I saw their show, and Todd Graham was the promoter of that. He's a good kid, does a really good job. I'm going a week from Saturday to see Focused Pro Wrestling. I don't know very much about it, but I've seen the NCW. They run up in Dedham, which is very close to where I live. So I sometimes I pop into that, But I do see some local shows, and what I find, Sean, to be perfectly honest with you, a lot of these shows are very, very similar to each other.
Yeah.
It's the same talent from one show to the next, and everybody has their own different take on their booking and whatnot.
But it's the same. You're right.
I mean, it's so interchangeable, and fortunately, I mean, a lot of these guys are drawing pretty well. I mean, they're doing pretty well as far as drawing crowds goes. But the other thing about it is that none of them are really, really standing out from each other.
Right. That's true.
I always tried to make necw stand out.
And it did.
We were doing actual broadcast television at one point. We had that deal with Comcast. We were doing the Comcast on demand stuff for a year. I mean, we were trying to be something, smarter than the average bear, so to speak. We were trying to be something a little bit bigger, a little bit better. Our talent choices, we always tried to have some unique talent.
Oh, you had some good talent. Yeah, I'll give you that.
Yeah. I mean, some folks you didn't see every place else, and people that we kind of put on the map by allowing them to do the things that they do. So
we thank you for that.
I see less of that now.
Yeah.
In a lot of these local groups, and not that they're doing anything wrong, because they're not. I mean, if you like Beverly Wrestling, it's Beverly Wrestling. If
right.
you like, Everett Wrestling is Everett Wrestling. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you really want to have an impact and stand out, you got to go the extra mile, and I'm not seeing a lot of that.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that one. I sadly, because I've been so busy with 700 other things between this podcast, the YouTube show, which takes up a lot anyway, then anti-bullying speeches everywhere. Because I do a lot of doing a lot of anti-bullying talks at the schools and stuff like that. And also, once in a while, I'll go and give seminars on how to talk and how to do promos and stuff here and there. But for the most part, I mean, a lot of the wrestling is kind of the same kind of thing. The other thing I see is a lack of passion for the company. What I mean by that is a lot of guys now, because, the independent circuit, you want to make as much money as you can. And like back when you ran necw, when you were booked at necw, were there from open to close, bell to bell. A lot of these guys have this new practice where they come in for their match, they'll leave right after they get paid up, and they leave, and they go to another show somewhere else, and then they, right. There's no loyalty in wrestling business. In that, do you understand what I mean?
Right. You absolutely hit on something very important.
You need to have loyalty, and you need to have that passion for what you're doing and for the people you're doing it with.
Well, you can't expect people to just work for you and nobody else. That's
of course.
unrealistic.
Right, but I mean, if you're committed
to... The sanctity of promotions is not as respected as it used to be.
Right.
And that's kind of unfortunate. I think that, I see a lot of these guys who we used to call them ring whores, who would just work everywhere. If you had a show and you were offered them, I'll go, I'll do good, I'll work.
Right.
And they didn't care. They didn't care if they were champion in your group and jobbing out in the opening match in the next group, 6 miles up the road. It didn't matter to them. They just wanted to wrestle and get paid and roll around and be in front of a crowd. And I think that's... the ability to build yourself up into the kind of attraction that people say, yeah, I want to go pay and see him.
Right. That's the exact thing. Yeah.
That's gone.
It is. It's sad.
It's sad. It is very sad. Yeah. I don't see a lot of that these days. So yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that perfectly. I
mean, I've seen it. It was a growing thing when I was kind of wrapping up the first time around in 2019. I'm looking around, and you go to, like a lot of us taught. You show up at a show, you book for that show, you're there for that show, and you build on that character. You do your best to build that brand there. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like a lot of the guys you used, I mean, I could say are synonymous with an ECW. Guys like Pat the Brat Piper, Rick Fuller, Slick Wagner Brown. A lot of those cut their teeth in ECW. Then there was me here and there when I popped up here once in a blue moon. But what you did for a lot of people is give people their moments, and people believed in those people. And yeah, you might see a Rick Fuller somewhere else, but you know that when they were in ECW, he wasn't going to be down the road. You know what I mean?
D.C. Dillinger, God rest his soul.
Another one, D.C. Dillinger. So many of the guys. T.J. Richter. Eddie Edwards, another one.
Yeah.
T.J. Richter I just saw recently, and people didn't know who he was anymore. And I knew who he was, like, off the bat, because I remember him in an ECW, and he's a referee, by the way, and I don't know if you knew, he's doing a referee thing down here in Rhode Island now, which, it was nice to see him, but nobody knew who he was anymore. Like, there's that new fan base. It's like, but I don't blame that on, T.J. Richter. That's not his fault. That's, that's the business. But like when you go to NECW, you know the guys at NECW, you know the Rick Fullers, and these are household names thanks to people like yourself for building them that way. I don't think a lot of people understand how valuable that is. And when you don't have that passion for the places that are giving you that opportunity, it follows you, and you're just, like you said, a ring whore or a wicked warrior, or, you're in it for the wrong reason, really. You don't learn anything from that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
You're just trying to think that you're going to be big on this, and you're kind of fulfilling that fake philosophy that you're going to build on what? The more eyeballs see you, you're going to be big. But in reality...
It started changing about 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I noticed it on my shows. We were doing television, and some of these guys who were experienced and really... they just didn't appreciate the fact that, they were being seen on local television, that nobody else was giving them that.
Right.
And our shows, even though, it was an obscure TV station on YouTube, we were getting tens of thousands of views every week.
Yeah.
And one guy, and I won't mention his name, he did an interview with a big website, and he didn't even mention us. And I said, hey, you were on a show last week that 30,000 people watched. When was the last time 30,000 people saw you do anything? And the least you could do was say, hey, watch me on this. I dressed him down in front of everybody, and then he was upset about it. But I was right.
Of course you are.
Where's the, what are you doing?
Right.
Why am I doing this for you if you don't appreciate it?
Exactly.
So, but there were a lot of guys that did appreciate it.
Yep.
And I think if you go back on YouTube and you watch the shows that we did, 7, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, 10 years ago, they hold up.
They do.
They hold up very well.
They do, and they're memorable.
Yeah. And, I'm very proud of those. I'm proud of the guys that we had at the time. So, like I say, the business has changed. It hasn't always changed for the better.
Right.
And I think a little dose of old school every now and then here
is a good thing. Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I think you exactly said, kind of one of the things that I think is the biggest point that I like to try to point out is we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for people like yourself. A lot of these guys forget who gave them their spots, who gave them that ring time, who made them. I am someone who always takes a moment to thank those who got us where we are. I don't magically become a wrestler. You don't just magically walk into a building and do those things. Those takes other people to help me get there. You know what I mean? And one of the things, I mean,
but Sean, I always thought, Sean, I was fortunate to have worked with the people that I got a chance to work with.
Right.
You know, I worked with some terrific people over the years.
Sure.
All you have to do is look at who wrestled for NECW and go down that list. In fact, if you want to go on YouTube after this to our YouTube channel, which is NECW Wrestling, all one word, you'll find the NECW 20th Anniversary Collection, which is 20 matches that summarize 20 years of New England Championship Wrestling. And just look at who's on those matches and some of the stuff that, not just the big names before they became famous,
sure, but
some of the locals who did the best work of their careers.
Right.
It'll if you're not familiar, it'll shock you at who was there and the things that local people did that really put local wrestling on the map.
I think it's important, and it's a sad thing that a lot of people forget those things. I am someone who always respects those who give us those opportunities. Why? I saw you at New England Fan Fest. One of the first things I said was, thank you, Sheldon. I want to thank you for everything you've done. Because if it wasn't for people like you, and actually I saw Slick at the same show. Every time I see Slick Wagner Brown, because remember, he was one of the people who trained me, I thank him for that. That loyalty, that respect, that's something that I always like to intervene, because that's something I was always taught. So I want to say thank you for all that. Publicly, I want to say thank you for all you've done for me particularly, but for all of those people who I know personally who have valued from what you have given them. And I don't think there's a lot of people in New England who want to be considered to be New England wrestlers who haven't had at least a stint in NECW during your time. And as someone who, has seen NECW, I went from a fan and then once in a while I'll pop up there as the other half of the things. I want to say thank you for everything you've done for me particularly, but then all of the other people, whether they know it or not, they wouldn't have a career if it wasn't for people like you giving them that opportunity. Because it's important for us to remember where we started. I myself, I understand where you're coming from. I've taken that time. I've had people who I've, had to, I've taken on the wing. I've showed them something, and they've kind of forgot all about anything because, it's their thing and whatever. But in reality, I don't take that to heart. I'm like, whatever. I'm glad that I was able to help them when I could, but I'm not that person. When I see someone like a Sheldon-Goldberg or a Slick Wagner Brown or someone who played a pivotal moment in my career, in my life, because there wouldn't be a Jazz Fitness or a Jazz Vengeance, and I wouldn't be doing the YouTube show. I wouldn't be doing any of this. The podcast doesn't exist without the people like yourself for helping to home that in. So I want to say thank you for that, for what you've done for me and countless other people I know who have really appreciated everything you've done. So thank you for that. Also, thank you for inspiring me to kind of finish my book. Because if Sheldon Goldberg can do it, I will too.
There you go.
And then, when I'm done writing mine, I'll invite you to my launch party.
Sounds good.
Well, Sheldon, before we let you go, I want to let people know what's coming up, where they can get this book, where they can find Sheldon Goldberg next, and whatnot.
Okay, well, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter, or X as they call it now, at NECW. The promotions Facebook is NECW Wrestling. You can find us on the web at necw.tv, where you can get all the information on the book. You can order an autographed copy on the website. And if you just want to get the book, it's on Amazon. Just look up The Last Fall, Sheldon Goldberg. You'll find it. And I hope you get a chance to read it, and I hope you enjoy it.
Excellent. Well, Sheldon, I want to say thank you for, again, everything you've been. Thank you for coming on here. And thank you for writing this book and inspiring writers like myself, also people in the wrestling world. Again, thank you for all of that. And also breaking that narrative that wrestlers are not smart or people in the wrestling business are not. There's this underlying narrative that wrestlers or people in the pro wrestling world aren't intelligent because, of what the things that we do in the wrestling world. And I have never found that to be accurate quite. That's usually the outside perspective. Yeah. So I want to say thank you for that and whatnot, Sheldon. I don't want to tie up your Friday because you're a busy man and you got things to do.
Yeah.
But you have a great weekend. It was a pleasure and an honor having you here. And everyone, go get the Last Fall, and I'll be seeing you, Mr. Goldberg, on November 9th at your launch party. I look forward to that and whatnot. Thank you, and you have a great rest of your day.
You too, my friend.
It was an honor. Till next time, and again, thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
See ya.
All right. Well, Sean, take care. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Take care now.
Yeah. You too.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Everyone, this is the icon Sean Jazz Stevens, and again, I want to say thank you to Sheldon Goldberg for everything that he has done, and he had a lot of narratives that are accurate, and what he said is 100% facts. The wrestling business, the wrestling world, has changed a lot. I've noticed this. And Sheldon is someone who I've known for a long time and I have a lot of respect for. And I do encourage you guys to follow links and where he said to go. The graphic I showed you in this video will show you that the Last Fall, and you can go and be there at the Boston Elks Lodge on Morrill Street on Roxbury, Mass. And you'll get an autographed copy from him and a gift, and it'll be a really good time. And I'll be there, among other people who Sheldon has helped out over the years. And it's nice to give back to someone who's given so much to the wrestling world. Whether people know it or not, if it wasn't for people like Sheldon Goldberg, none of us exist. And he is correct. Around the time that he's talking about is right when I started seeing that influx of people who kind of forgot about who we are, what we are. I think it's important to remember, if it wasn't for people like Sheldon and countless other people, our coaches, our trainers, and like his book isn't necessarily all just a wrestling fan. Anybody outside of the wrestling world can also relate to this. I think the message, the underlying lesson that we're both trying to, what I'm trying to convey is, me personally, is to give thanks to those who helped us get to where we are. I wouldn't know as much about martial arts if it wasn't for my senseis taking that time to teach me the skills that I do. I wouldn't be able to protect myself and have the confidence that I have, that I can walk down any street anywhere and have the confidence that I am safe because I can handle myself and others probably. And if it wasn't for my coaches on any of these sports teams, whether it be football, aka soccer, swim team, wrestling squad, basketball, softball, volleyball, bowling, all of those things, none of those things happen without someone guiding me to get there. My coaches, my trainers, my teachers. When I was in high school, my English teacher inspired me to continue writing. She believed in me so much that she entered my short story on my behalf to a contest, which ended up winning and representing my city. And I was only 18 at the time, 19. I was 19 at the time when she had my story published in a book that represents my city, with people in a book that had featured authors from all walks in life in the state. And obviously I was one of the youngest people to be included in that. I was honored for that. It was because my English teacher believed in me. What you don't know is as I said before, 6 months. I'm actually celebrating this very month will be 21 years when I stepped in my first year walking into the halls of Kowalski School, walking down those stairs into that area where Kowalski trained many people, including myself. And this is the month that I celebrate that 20-plus year career. And if it wasn't for Kowalski, Slick Wagner Brown, April Hunter, all of those people given that time and that opportunity to help me learn my voice, learn my craft. And also, if it wasn't for guys like Bret the Hitman Hart, the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, all honesty, Shawn Michaels, guys who weren't necessarily the biggest guys in the world. Owen Hart, the legendary Owen Hart, Brian Pillman, rest his soul. All of these people who might not have been the biggest human beings, the tallest guys, it's important to remember, if it wasn't for those guys who were like me, who were 6 feet tall, and at that point 210 pounds soaking wet, I wouldn't be in the wrestling world, because the wrestling world was always considered to be this big, gigantuan people. And it was thanks to guys like Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, the guys who weren't the biggest guys in the world, who opened the door for guys like myself, who weren't the biggest guy in the world. But I had a heart that matched the rest of me. So there was that. And the skill set that I had matched the rest. I want to say, Sheldon, I've known for a long time. Prior to me getting into the wrestling world, I had talked to Sheldon. I said, Sheldon, I'm going to get into wrestling. And he said, you will probably. And it was an honor to work with Sheldon over the years, learning from Sheldon. He is a wealth of knowledge. He demonstrated some of it today with his facts that he knows. He is a wrestling historian. And if it wasn't for people like Sheldon having that knowledge, and you heard from another person who isn't me about Walter Killer Kowalski and his impact on wrestling, but also the impact on everybody else around him. That wasn't a gimmick. There are a lot of people who forget where they came from, who helped them get there. I'm not someone who does that. I am honored and privileged and honored to have the training and know the people that I have over the years. I don't forget where I came from. I just build on it and make them all proud. So with that concludes the video portion of this show.
Recording stopped.
And as for the audio part, may all your dreams come true, everyone. Peace from the F4L Headquarters Podcast.